The H500 is technically the successor to the S340, an immensely popular case. With good reason. It was a simple design, it looked right, and in my opinion brought the whole tempered glass revolution of 2017, if I could call it that. But there were issues. There isn't such thing as a perfect case, I know that, but it wasn't exactly perfect. Airflow was a problem and it was quite tight for space internally, and it only had one top fan slot. How does the H500 improve on the S340 then? First off, unlike the S340, the H500 front panel and top panel is a single piece of steel and has two USB 3 ports and your usual audio ports power button, but it lacks a reset button. Some people would argue that the reset button is useless, but I welcome the addition of one. I mean, one is better than none, I suppose. I wish cases had more USB ports. We have plenty of motherboards with two front USB 3 headers for a total of 4 USB 3 ports, but most come with 2 USB 3 ports or recently Type-C, which isn't really usually found on motherboards. On the side, we have the intake vent, which looks pathetic, but actually airflow is pretty good on it, probably because the filter is situated on the intake itself. Speaking of airflow, we have two fans, one in the rear, one in the top, which is not a good way to set up in this case. Preferably you should have two fans in the front as well if you're not using an AIO liquid cooler in the front, which I will talk about it later on. Opening the side panel, it's a cinch as the tempered glass side panel has a captive thumb screw and a section that clamps on the case to be easily removed with one hand and held with another. The side panel is held in with some sort of pogo pins. The right side reveals the ugly end of the PC, as I would call it, which contains the cables usually, and NZXT has hidden the screws and zip ties in this very handy box. I'm speeding up the build process as there isn't much to note, as I will do a separate build guide for another day if you viewers are interested. And of course, I've run into a snag in the build process as the top fan blocks the APS 12V connector for the motherboard, which means either the top fan has to be taken out or the 8-pin has to be plugged into the motherboard before fitting in the motherboard into the case. I tried to install the Deepcool Castle 280, which I love very much, make no mistake. But I run into a snag here because the top radiator tanks are blocked by the fan frame. So I have to install the fans in the front. Actually, it doesn't matter because the radiator bottom tank is so big that fitting into the case is almost impossible, and when I do, the fan bracket sits above the points where it's supposed to screw into. What a shame. However, it's about to pick up again. The bottom of the case actually supports my beloved FSP RM PT 1200W power supply with room to spare. I've once heard of a person complaining that a certain case was badly designed because they couldn't fit a 1200W power supply in it, and it is slightly larger than the H500. Cable management is pretty easy, but it's probably just me that is unable to route the super fat power cables using the cable routing channels. There are two 2.5-inch drive slats supplied with this case, and it supports up to 4 depending on the space below the graphics card, and they can be repositioned around. Neat! This is actually a feature that was introduced with the H700. Removing the fan bracket, of which I installed 220mm fans into, reveals the dust filter on the right side panel and the bottom intake. The bottom intake is not fantastic as you have to open up the case to access it like the side panel. The power supply vent has a filter and it is very prudent to install the power supply fan facing downwards. From the bottom, you can see the bottom intake for the front fans, but do not remove the filter from the bottom or it's very hard to put back. It's much easier to access from inside the case. Also, you can see some screw holes for the hard drive cage. There is also an cable hider in the case, which is a bit of a faff when routing cables and SATA cables especially. In the top, there are gaps to route cables. So would I recommend it? At its current pricing, the H500 at $119 locally in Singapore, I would. The airflow is decent, the case looks good considering its competition it faces from the Fantex P350X, which is a good case for the price. But that has two top fan mounts rather than one, although you couldn't install an AIO liquid cooler. And at the very least, if you have RGB fans on the P350X, you will be able to see from the front, which in the NZXT you won't be able to. So, as a buyer, it's up to you to choose the cases. I cannot command you what to buy, but I can influence you. Is it a better case? I don't know. The NZXT, I have some experience with them. They are well built cases, yes. Certainly they are. But they're not the cheapest either. That's it for today's review. If you have any questions or suggestions, please leave it in the comment section below. Please press like to support us and subscribe to see more.